Hello and welcome to our Meet the Research talks, where we focus on the experiences and interests of the participant in research activities, particularly drug trials. I am pleased and privileged to introduce you to John and Sue Whipps, the two most committed people I know to the cause of research into Parkinson's. They will take you on a journey from diagnosis to now, and afterwards take questions from a panel.
Hello everybody, I'm Sue Whipps, and my partner John Whipps would like to tell you what it's like to be researched rather than a researcher. Our presentation today is called Research is Not Just a Load of Old Tablets. I'll pass you on to John.
Hi there. Yes, that's me. Quite a while ago, I was a very active person. I used to like doing all sorts of things like running 3 times a week, doing silly things, but very, very slowly and gradually, I became a rather different person. And that rather different person seemed to be related to what I was feeling like. And it turned out after a very, very long story, I saw a consultant who said, "Oh, you're a clever chappie. You know you've got Parkinson's, don't you?" I said, "No." He said, "Oh, just go away and read it on Google. You'll be okay. You don't need a Parkinson's nurse, do you?" What's a Parkinson's nurse? "Oh, you're too young to worry about that." And that was where it went. And that was how I actually got my diagnosis. So in 2007, my diagnosis was given to me and I was a little bit stunned. In fact, I think the bunny in the headlights is an absolute understatement of how I felt. I was completely amazed. So what then? We had just lots of questions, lots and lots of questions. So what was the cure? That would be nice. Is there a cure? Why on earth did I get it? I know nothing about that. I saw a neurologist. Why is it to do with my brain? How quickly would it progress? That's a good one. Everyone wants to know that. I certainly do. What's the best way of stopping it? Are there any drugs or anything we could use for it? I hadn't got a clue. So where do we go from there? Would it kill me? That's a good question too. I didn't know anything about that. Oh, it's quite clear to me then, nobody knew enough about Parkinson's. Ho-hum. In 2008, Sue and I attended a young Parkinson's event. Can you believe it? They considered we were young? Yes. We were told that cure was just 10 years away. And I believe that a few people that might be watching this video subsequently have heard that one before. Nevertheless, phew, I was told I wasn't going to die from a brain tumor straight away, so I'll be okay. So Sue, in her most organized fashion, had organized that we would retire to the sea and we moved to Cornwall and just relax. I should have known better. We got into the Southwest Parkinson's UK area and didn't really look back from then. And we met the local people and we learned a lot about how Parkinson's is handled on the ground. No high-powered science, nothing like that, just people.
I wasn't a person to let anything drop. John thought he was retiring and I thought I was retiring to look at the internet. I came across Tom Isaacs, who in 2005 co-founded the Cure Parkinson's Trust. And this diagram of the advocacy pyramid really struck me, how Tom Isaac moved his way out of the diagnosis phase, which is dreadful for anybody, towards becoming more balanced and being able to influence a cure. So on the side, I thought we would build the Whipps' advocacy pyramid. And I started with a few bricks. So laying the first layer, and I thought this is quite good, but it wasn't always stable. In 2010, we went to the World Parkinson's Congress in Glasgow to see how far we were towards this 10 years worth of cure. It was a real hardship. It was such a hardship, in fact, we went to the next 3 of them, ending up in Kyoto last year. But we were a bit disconcerted. Research could be somewhat disjointed. Well, that's an understatement. We met researchers who worked in labs and had never met anybody with Parkinson's. They had an interesting gadget and they just wanted to use that in some sort of research. Some people with Parkinson's didn't understand their condition or the therapies. And I'm afraid that stays today even. And on the other hand, clinicians haven't adapted the latest treatment ideas. And we found out in the World's Parkinson's Congress that they were still following the myths of levodopa and were holding back therapies. So we decided that we needed to build those bridges between people with Parkinson's, researchers and clinicians, and that because they sometimes seem to work in silos. So our question from the World Parkinson's Congress is, how could we bridge the gaps? So we were still gathering our building blocks. We added our own education and we actually started to engage with the world of research. We looked around for research that we could join.
And this is what we found, really. There wasn't a lot about. And so Sue and ourselves did something.
We went for the quick wins initially. We joined the Brain Bank, and we haven't been asked to volunteer for that yet, and hopefully we won't for a while. We raised money to try and fund research through Parkinson's UK. And John tried enrolling in trials, but it wasn't that easy. You have to fit the trial criteria. He was either too young or too old, or he'd unwisely gone on to drugs already, or the drugs he was on were the wrong drugs, and he didn't have the right side effects, and he didn't have any relatives with it. And the most annoying of all, he was too far away from the study site. So we were looking for the Goldilocks moment, and it was very elusive.
So what did we do with ourselves when we couldn't get involved in research directly? Well, that's a moot question, because we started to answer questionnaires and contributed to developing pain and sleep scales, lots of paper research. So we were starting on research, but something we could get our teeth into. And because of my background in scientific research, my involvement with Parkinson's UK, early on, when I was still viewed as a super scientist, I interviewed people in Parkinson's UK for research posts, trying to apply some modicum of relationship between the researchers and in some cases clinicians for the layman, the person with Parkinson's. And so we started to involve people looking at lay summaries of grant applications to assess their relevance to people with Parkinson's. And indeed, our chairman on this day, superly hidden away, Chris, is continuing this work ever since. And because of the background that I had, I used to explain these results to Sue. That has completely reversed. And so Sue now translates my research speak and writes successive articles explaining research to people with Parkinson's in Cornwall and elsewhere. And she started to get answering surveys about care partner experiences. Care partners just weren't even considered then. And gradually we met more and more opportunities for researchers to meet local people with Parkinson's. So getting researchers out of the labs. And similarly, we organised focus groups for researchers to come to see if they could find people that would be willing to work with those researchers. So it's on the background, you don't see this.
And the more we did locally, the more research centres and projects came to our attention. But this was one of the problems we had. The research publicity was written in obscure language. You've all heard the phrase, "can't see the wood for the trees." Well, I'm afraid some of the research summaries were read like this. So an open label phase 3 study examining the long-term safety, tolerability and efficacy of APL-130277 in levodopa responsive patients with Parkinson's disease complicated by motor fluctuations off episode. And I think the people who wrote this didn't understand what commas were for. So it was very difficult to find out if we were actually interested in that sort of research. And we realized that if we were having that trouble and we were fairly intelligent people, everybody would be having that problem. So working with the NIHR, which is the National Institute for Health Research, and the Clinical Research Network, John and I helped set up 2 one-day conferences to bring together people with Parkinson's, researchers and clinical teams. Quite often you can't get hold of clinical teams, and so I felt this was a bit of a coup. So we had pure scientists coming to talk to us about their results. We had a chance for people affected by Parkinson's to network with those researchers and ask them questions. But also there were study teams, the nurses and the doctors all around the region who were able to talk to people during the breaks and explain what the research meant. John and I became volunteer research champions and research speakers for Parkinson's UK, which meant that we wrote articles and we went around to other groups to explain what research was all about. And because of that, in 2018, we decided to found a research interest group. So we founded the PENPRIG, the Peninsula Parkinson's Research Interest Group. And we gathered in a few interested people who would entertain helping. And we developed an online presence, which has become more and more important during this COVID lockdown. Initially, we invited researchers to speak to groups, large groups and small groups. But the one in March of this year, 2020, had to go online. And we then started the Meet the Researcher online talks. So, more bricks in our pyramid: advocacy and influence. Just participation and a cure to go. Not too far away then.
So, suitably, I'm behind the scenes again now. I became a co-applicant on a project Adept PD study, and it's part of the management group. This again reflects the old background of working as a chief rather than a leader. I was also interviewed for local TV and radio, and that was quite interesting as well, because somehow I had to try to decrease my amount of shaking, which wasn't too good then. Sue, of course, is involved up to her eyeballs with this sort of thing. She's helping to develop a home-based care pathway as a neurology service development in Plymouth. And you meet a whole different set of people that way. We were both invited as to be PPI members of the Trial Steering Committee for PD STAT, another Parkinson's project. And we're also helping to develop an app to assist people in monitoring their non-motor systems and provide a self-management advice procedure. So there's all sorts of things we still have our fingers in, and they're not always pies, but never mind, we're trying our best.
So John actually got to fit the description of one of the research projects that was being run locally. He met his Goldilocks moment. So by that stage, he'd had Parkinson's for about 8 to 9 years. He had increasing motor fluctuations, so he was going on and going off. And despite having all the medications under the sun, it wasn't very well controlled. He didn't like the thought of deep brain stimulation. Didn't bother me, but then it wasn't my brain. And he still is not a fan of needles. But luckily, we had a consultant called Camille Carroll, and she was able to talk about research opportunities in proper English. And she was very good at tailoring the research opportunity to the person. And she suggested we looked further at a sublingual apomorphine study. And blow me down, it was the same study that we couldn't really understand the first time round. So with her help, and with the help of the study team and the patient participation sheet, John was able to be convinced to join in with the study. So that was the first study John did, and very successful for him too. But makes you wonder why anybody would join in with a study. And John's going to tell you why he thinks it was a good thing to do.
Well, I think for me, I got so much more from it too. It wasn't just being a service. I gained a lot. So how often have you got a question about Parkinson's? I have it all the time. And they've got a team there ready to help you. And always, if they don't know, they'll find someone who does. Because they need to keep a monitor on any changes that a drug might cause, you have to have regular physical examinations. So you have to go to hospital regularly. That's not so good, but you find out so much about yourself. You know, how's your blood pressure? Are you got anything strange about yourself? And the expenses are covered as well. Sometimes you can have bacon roll. Also, you have a telephone number that you can reach them if you have problems. Can you imagine that? Being able to contact someone when you need it. That's just fantastic. Similarly, you can withdraw your consent at any time and you don't have to give a reason. And just imagine that they set all this up and then say, I don't fancy that anymore. It must be a blow for the researchers, but that's your right. And you just learn so much about your own Parkinson's. I identified when I was off, when I was on, from just some of the processes I had to go through routinely at these tests. So yes, it can be really hard work to go through some of these tests all the time, but you get something from it, I get something from it, and hopefully in the long run we all benefit. So for me, it's a good one to do.
So as you know, Parkinson's is progressive, and at the top doses of apomorphine given sublingually, it still wasn't holding Parkinson's symptoms at bay for John. For some reason, he still wasn't quite ready for DBS or duodopa, because that's an intestinal pump, and he held back from assessment for quite a while. And in that time, Dr. Carroll took on an open label, single arm study to evaluate the safety and tolerability of a 24-hour daily exposure of continuous subcutaneous infusion of AbbVie 951 in subjects with Parkinson's disease. Again, we wouldn't have been sure what that was all about. But when it comes down to it, this is what it's all about. John wears this pump in what we call his holster 24 hours a day, and the drug goes through a cannula line into the belly area. Well, if it had been me, it would have had plenty of space. Unfortunately, John hasn't, but it's still very tolerable for John. And we're hoping that this will eventually become a treatment.
It works great for me.
Yeah, it works great for John. That's good. So we've got all of our bricks in order. But when we put them together, it wasn't so much a pyramid, more a game of Jenga. But never mind, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and we feel we've taken our single step. Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Sue and John. I must say, when I first saw this, so much of that rang true with me, and I could have written something similar. And I mean, I don't claim I'm nearly as active in trying to rattle the Parkinson's community down here as you are, but it was just something that every day when I look in the mirror, I can see myself, and I can recognize what you described in your presentation. So
You're not as old as us, Sully. You'll get there.
Anybody got any questions? Don't be shy. Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
I haven't got Parkinson's, but I belong to the PIG, based at Exeter University. Are you linked in with PIG at Exeter University?
I didn't know there was a PIG at Exeter University.
Okay, Sue and everyone, what I'll do is I'll contact you, Sue, because I've got your email address. But ages ago, when my involvement came very much as a lay person looking at research documents that were before they went out for people to get involved, rather like what you were showing. And there's a group of us, lay people, that look at some of these research documents before they get their funding to see that they're written in plain English. 2 years ago said, is there anything for Parkinson's? I'd be interested. Is there anything for Parkinson's? I'd be interested. Thankfully, it was through Mary Jane Hunter that I linked in with you guys. So I feel that I need to let them know that you exist, but also that I need to let you know that they exist. It's very much what the Exeter University is getting involved in terms of research, medical research. So I'll send all that information to you, Sue.
Thank you.
See, Nigel had a question in the chat. Do you want to read that loud, Nigel?
Yes, Parkinson's Connect, an initiative from Parkinson's UK, is hoping to engage with people with Parkinson's at the very earliest of stages and really hold a hand through as much as they can from diagnosis. Do you think that research opportunities will provide early benefits to people with Parkinson's, or perhaps at the earliest stages when sort of anxiety is at its worst, perhaps leave a person confused and maybe distressed?
I think that very much depends on the person. Some people dig a big hole and jump into it for quite a while. That bottom layer of the pyramid, which is our Jenga, is different depths for some people. And I know people who are 5 years on who would rather sit with their fingers in their ears, and it's up to them. But personally, we felt, because we were research scientists, that research was the way forward. And we were disappointed to find that there wasn't anything we could join in with. At that stage, there were no disease-modifying therapies coming to trial, but now there are. So the younger or the earlier stage you can get involved with the disease-modifying trials, the better for the person participating. So rather than trying to switch people off, we need to be encouraging early people soon after diagnosis in. But the diagnosis is a bit of shock horror. I'm sure you'll all agree.
Anybody else a question?
Yes, how did this play out? How did the diagnosis play out with your relatives and family?
Well, I was not in a good place at all. My family couldn't have been more supportive. My work couldn't have been more supportive. I broke down in the middle of the head of department's office and didn't look back from there, really. So I got laid off from work. I was given a time off to get better, so to speak.
Didn't work.
It didn't work. No. So in the end, I just got given early retirement on ill health grounds. But it was a huge effort, but everything was laid on for me. So my GP was absolutely brilliant. So when I was diagnosed, he did the diagnosis, didn't tell me. He sent me up, followed all the nice guidelines, that sort of thing. So my GP was brilliant. It's just that my consultant was a new lad, and I think he wasn't quite very skilled in person-to-person interactions, and that's when the Parkinson's nurse took him in hand, so to
That's
speak.
the definition of a neurologist, actually, I think. Our family were very supportive before diagnosis, because we all thought John was going to drop dead, and we thought he had a brain tumour or something like that. It was just persuading him that he was ill and needed to go and see the GP first. So they were in it right from the beginning. And our daughter, once John had settled down a little bit, our daughter found him a support group for younger onset Parkinson's people, and they were really good.
I was very, very lucky because everyone supported
Yeah.
me up to the eyeballs. So.
We're quite nice people here.
Anybody else? Any questions or comments?
Can I just add a
Yeah,
comment?
go ahead, Jeff. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm from the east of England, and my experiences over the last 5 years have been very similar to what you were saying there, where you're told this is what you've got, now go away. And isn't there a Parkinson's nurse? Oh no, we haven't got one at the moment. So what do I do? And nothing. And it's a case of you come back and look on the internet and start trying to find things out. And I've ended up, as a result of that, joining Parkinson's UK and becoming part of the RIG group in the east of England. The thing I'm not sure of is how to make contact with potential researchers, scientists. As you say, the research projects I've looked to volunteer for, I've generally not been on the right tablets, or I haven't got the right symptoms, or whatever it might be. And just think, where'd you go next?
We were lucky because down in the southwest there was something called the Dendron Register.
Yeah.
So if you had dementia or a few other neurological conditions, you could sign up to this register. And in theory, although it didn't work very smoothly because it was all paper-based then, as soon as a project came up and you fitted their criteria, they alerted you to that, and you could then express an interest in finding out more. Because the researchers have got the opposite problem, is they know that there are people out there with Parkinson's who would fit their Goldilocks criteria, but they can't approach them. Whereas Camille Carroll, our consultant, is a researching neurologist with Plymouth University, but has clinical time as well. So she sort of works on a more personal level. And when John was getting assessed for DBS and duodopa, she approached him and trapped him in the corner of a room and said, I've got something better for you, don't commit yourself yet. So that's the first time we knew about John's pump that he wears now and has done for a year. But without that, I don't know how, without a person like that, I don't know how participants are approached legally, ethically. And that's why we wanted to meet the researcher talks online and not let it all go slack, because we want to bring news of research to people with Parkinson's. So in our area, they've got started an exenotide trial, and I can't find that anywhere else other than I know somebody who's just gone onto it. So rumour has it again. So I've got to track that down and put it onto the website. And it is a little bit like that. It's hard work. But being involved with research nurses, you can always give them an email. Ping, I think, is the verb to email somebody now. We can ping them and they'll let us know what's recruiting. So that's useful. Getting on the inside first helps.
But I think there was the comment that Jeff made was that getting Parkinson's UK, getting involved with Parkinson's UK, which we did right up to our eyeballs.
Yes, that's right.
We learned so much from just dealing with drop-ins every week. We used to see someone around parts of Cornwall, and that was regular, routine. It was mundane, but we got to know people very well. And it's so that who ended up on the committee is people that came through those, who ended up. But it's a lot of work. We did it because we were interested, wanted to know more, meet people, and of course because we like to talk sometimes, and we used to see so many people. They knew nothing about the support that was available, where they could go, how they could help themselves, what you did. It was just completely blank, and it's really hard work to do.
Jane O'Leary has just put her finger on a fundamental problem in the medical world. There are insufficient qualified people generally in the neurology sphere, and specifically in Parkinson's. In fact, we are, although we might complain about it, we are relatively blessed down here in the southwest with the availability, at least, of neurology expertise, if not specific interest in Parkinson's. And this is not going to change in the short term, is my view, Jane. And therefore, we have to be more knowledgeable as a community, and that's the message that I think Sue and John are really projecting quite strongly, is that we have to understand more about ourselves to help the general neurologists get somewhere better than, oh, just go away and read a book.
Yeah.
I totally agree, and I think one of the problems is a lot of people with Parkinson's are scared or nervous of going into research. They're scared even of telling people they've got Parkinson's for some years. I mean, my wife was a brilliant example of that. It's about 7 years before I was allowed to tell anybody officially. And I think that's quite a general problem. I've spoken to other people as well. How do we get around that one? I don't really know. I think it's probably at GP level, because they're very busy as well, in that they could perhaps point to Parkinson's UK or whatever and lead people in gently. But it's a very big problem. I mean, Sue and John are so marvellous because they're driven to be involved. A lot of people are not.
I think the early stages are a real minefield. I mean, I plead guilty to ignoring and staying away from the support groups for 4 or 5 years because I didn't want to meet people like me.
Neither did we, Chris.
And you can see the respect in which I'm held amongst the rest of the group. But seriously, all we're doing, I think, is making it possible for people to talk.
Jane, did you have another question?
Well, I was just, when I was first diagnosed, which was towards the end of 2017, although I probably had Parkinson's for the best part of a decade, so that's another story. I went on the Parkinson's First Steps program, which I found very helpful. And although they didn't specifically talk about research, there was, that was the possibility of that was opened up and how to find out about it. So I think some of these early Parkinson's initiatives are worth doing. And I know there are people who don't want to know about, they're sort of in a state of denial or whatever. But there are enough people, I think, who want to be proactive about the course of their disease and want to know more about it. So I suppose it is just that plugging away, isn't it? It's hard work and just plugging away. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, we've certainly been trying to pull together links with people more generally around the east of England. And I think we've got about 50 support groups or branches in the east of England area. And we've been trying to communicate with them they've been creating research champions in each. So we're trying to work with them in order to get a bit more unity amongst the people with Parkinson's in the east.
Go ahead, Sue.
I think there are several points coming out of that. Being research champions and volunteer research speakers has enabled us to go all around to different groups in Devon and Cornwall. And having human people who bicker on stage as a matter of ploy as well as habit has demystified science to some extent. And then COVID coming has enabled us to put things online that otherwise people would have had to have attended. Mm-hmm. So I've attended research conferences up in Glasgow, and I'm about to do one in Dundee if there's still spaces, which I wouldn't go to normally. So I find out an awful lot more about research, and then there's a little hook, you think, oh, well, can I get involved with this? So, but I haven't told John yet. But that's how it is. And it's nice to have a researcher come out and speak to a group. We had that originally for the ambroxol study, which you can see on our YouTube channel through the Penprig link. And that captivated an audience that were really there for the beer, for the lunch, and because there'd been a drop-in that morning, and a lot of them stayed on for the talk, and they learned a lot, and it demystified science again. But you've got to get the right speakers. You can't get highfalutin, big word and acronym type speakers.
I just wanted to say we're in the West Midlands, myself and hubby, who's hidden at the moment. I just wanted to say that, yes, when we first moved up here, we found it quite difficult. We had to dig like mad to find things that were going on. And then we were quite surprised when we did find things, even if we had to drive a little way. And we are finding more things now. But what I've just found out is that there's actually a Northwest research interest group, which is they're trying to start up. So that was the reason for me to coming on today to see, what you do. So I'm really quite interested to see how they go on.
I chatted to the Parkinson's UK link for that group, so I zoomed with her during the week.
Oh, right.
I'm glad you're here, that's good. So you can put into English what I was garbling.
Oh, I wouldn't guarantee that. I don't mean that I couldn't translate it, but my memory's always not very good.
No. Here.
Well, we have very interesting memories of the West Midlands as well. We lived in Solihull when I was diagnosed.
Oh, right.
I went to one of the places there, and it was the nearest I got to coming. I'm never having anything more to do with the early diagnosis, because it was like going into 900-year-old people with sing-along-a-max, and I was 54. I was out of there like a rocket. But my daughter found a young Parkinson's group out in Wolverhampton, and this guy came to my house in Dorridge, drove all the way around the M whatever it is, now 6 to take me to a young Parkinson, and it was just the dedication from him. It was a bit scary because he had a real good disco at the same time, but fantastic. And that's the sort of people that really care and make a difference.
Networking is important, and even in research.
All right. Anybody else wants to ask something, make comments?
I had a question sent to me about the different phases of research. So could we explain the difference between a phase 1, phase 2 and phase 3 trial? So I looked it up today just to make sure. And the reason it takes a new drug, completely new drug, a long time to come to market, is because first somebody has to come up with a cunning plan, like I know what's wrong in Parkinson's, and I know that this particular drug, this molecule, might attack that area. Then they have to try it in cell cultures, animal models, and all the rest. So that takes a few years to do. And then, assuming it hasn't killed the mice and it has improved the cells, they can then apply for a phase 1 trial where the drug is tried in a very small number of people that don't have the condition. So they're the fit and healthy ones, and they're monitored really closely to make sure it doesn't have an adverse effect. And then if none of those die, and it's tolerable, so instead of ambroxol that tastes really bitter, if it's tolerable to the participants, it then goes on to phase 2, and that's tried in the subject audience, so people with Parkinson's, and that's a smaller group, not smaller than the first, slightly bigger than the first, but of course selected as not being too ill. And if it's tolerable and has an effect, and that's where some things fall down, it's then put into a phase 3 trial and used on a wider area of people with Parkinson's. And the really important thing with all these trials is to set the right goalposts. So if you say when you start a trial, I want to see if this is a miracle cure for Parkinson's, and then you measure for a miracle cure and it isn't, you might miss all the other improvements and it looks like the drug doesn't do its job. So you've got to set the right goalpost, the right outcome measures, and measure that trial against that to see if there's any improvement at all, if it's been successful. And there have been quite a few trials where the drug has been withdrawn because it was regarded as not being a successful trial. And the GDNF trial, I don't know if you know about that one, that's a growth factor that's put directly through a portal into the brain. It was carried out in Bristol. That showed wonderful improvements for some people. And unfortunately, I don't think they did the genetic studies to see if some people would benefit and others wouldn't. And they didn't set sensitive outcome measures. So they set the gross, this is going to improve everything. And the outcome measures that did improve were not good enough for the drug company to carry on.
But it's interesting now that they're actually looking at some of the data that's coming out retrospectively. And then it looks that you can actually pull apart different treatments.
Yeah.
And some of the treatments, which is the ones you're really interested in, work, but it's only a low proportion. And if you can use, it's like targeting which ones for reuses.
Repurposing.
Repurposing.
Yeah.
Now, you've got to know that it works in something. And the safety aspects, of course, if it's repurposing, all the safety's been done, so that doesn't come into it. It saves an enormous amount of money and time. So if you design the trial correctly, you can get a straightforward big answer. It works great. But if parts of it don't work, you still get that information. And that gives you an idea of where you should be going from that.
To target future research,
Anybody else want to ask a question or make a comment?
Yes, I have a question.
In what context?
Yes, Andrew.
Yes, I took part in the PD stats study, and I'm wondering, I know everybody knows what the result was, but are these results on clinical trials, are they exchanged with other countries internationally? Because it seemed to me that there'll be a lot of double work done when it isn't necessary. If results could be shared, it would get us quicker, faster to possibly slow down or a cure.
This is an absolute can of worms, because you again fall into this: who does what where, who benefits from the results. So if you think about it, if a chemical company spent the money, they want to have all the rights to it. And if that means if you declare everything, you don't get anything from it. So that is always a very difficult thing to deal with from the start off. Then, if you have got something that looks useful, how do you protect it? And all these things take so much longer to get a paper out. Whereas if you're working in a lab, and you do a couple of quick experiments, you can publish it in a high-powered journal if you've got a big enough group and you've got a big enough name, really fast. And that's another one of your peer-reviewed publications in a high-impact journal. You've done it. Whereas if you think of a clinician, they're run off their feet trying to do anything, and trying to organise this huge group of people to write a paper. Someone has to take the plunge. And it's amazingly difficult to do. Incredibly hard work.
But I will say, PD Stat, now it's published, is shared around the world. The other thing that we do in Cornwall, under the auspices of Pembrey, but also the Mid-Cornwall Parkinson's UK branch, is to invite undergraduate researchers. So we're lucky in Plymouth to have a school of physiotherapy, and every now and then they come up with a dissertation, and they come out with some weird and wacky idea to try and measure how round your shoulder is and how well you breathe. And they come out and talk to a meeting, a drop-in. Obviously that's stopped at the moment, but that lets younger researchers meet people with Parkinson's, and I think they get surprised by how Parkinson's is.
Right, so thanks very much. I'd like to definitely thank the Pembrey group and John and Stu to put this material together, and all of you to dial in, show an interest and participating and making it such a lively discussion. I really enjoyed that. Thanks very much.